I'll call the city council work session to order. Clerk, please call the roll. Our special meeting, I apologize.
All right, Councilperson Felder?
Here.
Whitman? Steelgrave? Here. Vining?
Here.
Germaine?
Here.
Lamore?
Present.
Mayor Clark?
Present. Mr. Pastu, I know we have a special meeting here, some items. Is there anything other than looking for the motion?
If I may, Your Honor, before we go into closed session, we've got one item dealing with labor negotiations, and we have with us in that session will be our Director of Human Resources, Peggy Howard. She's going to be wrapping up and headed for retirement at the end of this week after 14 years with the city, and just wanted, since we're televising this portion of the meeting, just wanted to acknowledge and thank her for all the years of service and that we're going to miss her. There's no doubt about it, but she's been a great asset to the city and to the staff over the years. So just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peggy. We'll just make this a continuous closed session and you'll have to stay here. So.
Nothing else other than just the two items that we have here is with the closed session is the quarterly litigation update, land acquisition, and labor negotiations.
I know that there was a correspondence sent on the motion. I think that's prepared, so make sure we account for everything. And at that point, we're looking for Councilman Lamore.
Yes, I'll make a motion that we go into closed session for the purpose of litigation update regarding the following cases: Tracy Mix Harm, Tina Marie Carroll, Monroe Charter Township, and Nathan Carr, as well as to discuss land acquisition and labor negotiations.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Lamore, supported by Councilman Feller to go into closed executive session for the items stated in the motion. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Felder?
Yes.
Steelgrave? Yes. Vining?
Yes.
Germaine?
Yes.
Lamore?
Yes.
Mayor Clark?
Yes.
Need a motion to go back into open session.
Into open session.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Moore, supported by Councilman Felder, go back in open session. Clerk, you want the roll, please?
Councilperson Felder,
Here.
Whitman,
Yes.
Oh, yes, I thought you wanted to take roll.
No, we're going back in the session. Do you want to vote for that?
Yeah.
Is it yes then?
Then yes. My apologies.
Oh, well, we're making a motion to go back in open session. It's, do they want to go back in open session? So,
oh, right, so, okay.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So Vining? Yes. Jermaine? Yes. Lamore?
Yes.
Mayor Clark? Okay.
Thank you.
good, good.
So next on the agenda is, please, I'm sorry.
The next item on the agenda is public comment.
Okay, at this time, because before we get into the work session and because we had a special meeting, our special meeting is required that there's an opportunity for public comment. Didn't want to wait to the end in case we run to the last minute. So if there's any public comments at this time, any of those present would like to make a comment, and we'll have our work session topics next. See no public comment? Clerk, next item, please.
The next items begin the work session agenda, 3610 refuse recycling contract.
Mr. Pastu.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Lewis, if you want to come join us up here. As I put in my brief fact sheet for the city council is that our refuse recycling yard waste contract with Waste Management's set to expire. I said June 30th, 2022. That's 2023. We've got a year to work with this, but as we discussed previously, if you're changing a vendor, you easily want to give them at least 6 months lead time to mobilize, train, purchase what they need to get familiar with your community before they start. And so we're at that planning stage right now. And as I mentioned in there, Mr. Lewis and I met, and Mr. Cochran as well, was with Waste Management probably about 3 weeks ago. They're definitely interested in considering a rebid, but only if there was a bid that required a 98-gallon tote container. And so, we bring this to you just to let you know where it's at. If the council is interested, then we could have something back from them probably by sometime late July, mid-August, I think is what we talked about.
Yeah.
And if it's not any good, then we got time to put something out on the street and solicit the bids. The interesting thing about it was in the conversation, just so those that remember, the recycling business is doing well these days. And so that was a big concern, 2.5 years ago. It's not the case now. It's recovered. And so, but they are, I think more and more, I'm doing all the talking. I'll let Patrick talk, but the industry itself is so different. Hard to find drivers. And that's what's driving a lot of this circumstance where they'd like to do it with these 96-gallon tote containers, so that just makes it easier with their mechanical arms to pick up and dispose and return to the curb. So, Patrick, what else? Go ahead and a little bit more.
Certainly. First, Honorable Mayor and Council, Patrick Lewis, Director of Engineering and Public Services, just for the record. Jumping off of what Mr. Pastu said, too, that was exactly our intention. I won't repeat much of what he said, but certainly we would like to get a contract in place, whether it's an extension contract with Waste Management or whether it's a contract with them or a new vendor through a new bidding by about the end of the year. That gives us 6 months to prepare, because even as Mr. Pastu pointed out, Waste Management has been talking to us for 2 or 3 years about their desire and the industry need really to go to as much automated collection as possible. Now, with that said, I think obviously some of the concerns we've had in the past couple of contracts that we need to work around is how do we handle the streets that have very dense on-street parking, because you can't simply, like in rural areas, get the arm out, pick up the can, dump it, put the can right back, because you might be going through a parked car or something like that. And likewise, how do you get the cans down to the street? If they're a 96-gallon can, you got to wheel them over the curb, things like that. Right now, what we have, just as sort of a reset, what we have is technically it's unlimited collection. It's what they call hand pick, which means it can be in bags, it can be in cans that they dump, and then we have the recycling carts, which are the 64-gallon totes. And those have been very popular with the residents. I can tell you that from our staff. In fact, what we do hear a lot of, and again, it's certainly not a majority of residents yet saying this, but a lot of people are asking, when are we going to get those for garbage? Now, with that said, there's a difference in the neighborhoods because, for example, I'll use the extremes would be Frenchman's Bend, where you don't have a lot of on-street parking. You could go to a rural-type collection right now and have very few issues. Versus some of the streets, I'll say, like your Cass, your Harrison, the neighborhoods that have a high density of rental units, a high density of on-street parking, that's a little more challenging. One thing I did want to add to what Mr. Pastu said is one of the options that they did mention to us, and we'd have to flesh this out a little bit in the proposals, is what do we do for some of the senior citizens, things like that, people like that don't want a 96-gallon cart. The 96-gallon cart would be the baseline, and that represents similar to the 3 containers that we had with the contract prior to this. And so that's kind of an industry standard size, but as you might guess, it's a whole lot harder to haul a 96-gallon trash can filled with trash to the street than it would a 64-gallon recycle cart. So those are some of the challenges we've got to overcome. Obviously, what's driving that is kind of two-pronged. At first, when we met with Waste Management pre-pandemic, the primary thrust was safety, because the more you have to have people get off the truck, the more prone there are to accidents and fatalities. And unfortunately, it is fatalities with the refuse industry. But the secondary problem that's transpired primarily after the pandemic was the availability of drivers. And in early 2021, we had any issues we've ever had with Waste Management, the largest of those were in early 2021, where it was so difficult to get drivers and routes were delayed and things like that. So it's not just a Waste Management problem, it's an industry problem. And so that's the second leg that's sort of driving this to an automated collection. We've started looking at options for downtown. And again, we don't have a proposal to put in front of you tonight because Waste Management is crafting that. And again, as you know, it's totally up to you whether you want to entertain I'll call it a sole source extension proposal from Waste Management for another 5 years. And certainly if we're having to amortize those carts for trash, they would want, and we would probably want, a 5-year contract extension. Or whether we put it out on the street for bidding. And again, we'd be looking at least a 5-year term, because that's, again, if you want to purchase those carts as part of the contract, they need time to spread those out. And I don't think we want to have possibility of switching vendors every 2 or 3 years either. So, have I missed anything of substance?
No, I think those are good points to follow up on what I said. But I'm going to carry it a little bit further. We're kind of at a point too where there's certain aspects of our refuse collection and service and who pays that's going to come into some question. We know in some of the streets that Mr. Lewis referenced, where you have single-family homes that basically have multi-family tenants in there, and part of it is I anticipate that any vendor or contractor that goes to these 96-gallon totes is going to incur additional cost. You may need to start considering having those pay for the service that the others have. So, for example, you got 4 units in this residential home. Okay, the first one is part of your tax bill. The other 3 are going to be, part of a service cost. And the other part of it is that we're working around, in some cases, these same type of rental units where, our streets are functionally their parking lot. And that creates a service problem from a refuse collection standpoint, but also a problem for, neighbors as well, that, these streets are, again, as I said, starting to function in some ways like a parking lot. So there's a couple of things, and they're tangential. They're not part of the overall contract, but they do have an effect on the contract. And it's just something that I think over the succeeding months that we're going to have to discuss how we're going to handle that, along with just the structure of the service that would be provided. So,
I don't know if you want to get into financial right now yet. I
think it's a little premature, but
but understand that we will be likely looking at an increase. I mean, we're certainly not going to do better than we did, because the contract right now has a CPI adjustment every year. the floor is 0, which, I think that was something the industry wanted because in the previous 5-year term, we actually had a negative a couple of years, but the ceiling is 3% a year. So as you might expect, if you're held to 3% for 2 consecutive years when the general inflation rate is 8% or more, there's going to be what our engineers would call a step function. There's probably going to be a jump in there of 8 to 10% on the next contract term because they were held a little bit artificially low for certainly the year coming up, but the year we've also just left. So just wanted to point that out. And one other thing that we did want them to quote was we're starting to see later and later yard waste. So we did ask them to quote 41. It'll be 41 weeks of yard waste is what it's going to turn into, I think, because it would go all the way through the 3rd week of December. And that's proven to be something that I'd say at least every other year we've had an extension on the yard waste because the leaves don't drop. Weather's still pretty good. So we're kind of working those service changes around the margins. But one of the other things, too, is we don't believe we'll likely be doing an unlimited contract moving forward. So that's something that we'll flesh out and get into those details when we get their proposals back. But I wanted to point that out, that what you see from them will not be an unlimited contract at this point.
We just want to get your feedback on it, thoughts, and, we'll go from there.
Michelle, I see you push your button. We'll start there and work our way down.
So I was going to assume that there would not be an unlimited contract. So there would be a charge for extra garbage, I would assume.
We're still working out what the best way to do that is. We're not seeing the majority of people are not exceeding what would be the old 3-container limit. What we're starting to see a lot of is the unlimited being kind of taken advantage of, and back to the multiple units that we have on a particular site. That's where we're seeing a lot of the issues, and we do fight a lot with move-outs, where you'll have landlords that will throw it all out to the curb and say, well, it says unlimited pickup, you got to pick it up. And it hasn't been the panacea we hoped it might be to encourage people to. What it was designed to do was help us with the blight enforcement, where we had the moral high ground and said, you have unlimited pickup and there's no excuse for having blight in your yards. It hasn't quite worked out that way. So that's
the one thing with it is that they did talk about was having a, one bulk item per week. And so, if you've got a couch or something, or mattress or whatever, as long as it's bagged, you can take that out to the curb. But it kind of, they'll understand that. But knowing full well, there isn't going to be many of them. It'll be more the exception than the rule.
And we've talked about some options for like some neighborhood cleanup days, things like that, where they might have a week or a couple weeks a year where it would be, I don't want to say unlimited, but where you'd have options for disposing of a greater amount of refuse, and sort of like a spring cleaning thing. And 20 years ago when I first started with the city, we used to have some of those things where we do, they'd have a dumpster that would rotate around and things like that. But all those options are on the table if we're going to go to just one container, the 96 gallon. So we're still working our way through some of those, but I just kind of wanted to throw those topics on the table for tonight.
Container's going to be bigger than the vehicle in our driveway.
Thank you, Your Honor. So the 96-gallon container is the only one that they have on the table right now. Is there anything smaller than that?
I probably didn't make that clear that they are talking about that. They do have options in other communities where you can request something smaller. So what would happen is they'd probably give everybody a 96-gallon, then you can call them and say, will you please take this back? I want a 32.
Okay.
And that would be an option for the senior citizens and things like that.
Yeah, because there's a guy across the street that has one bag every week. My neighbor has one bag. I can't imagine they're going to want anything more than one, that huge container like that.
Yeah.
It'd be overwhelming for them. And like you said, I was thought the same, that we occasionally had those unlimited pickup days. That could also help out as far as changing from unlimited to the 96-gallon tote. That would be, I think, probably the best way to go, but I don't know. Kind of see what they bring to the table and go from there.
Absolutely. And there's nothing that says we can't tweak what they bring to the table either. So it's just, it's really kind of a binary choice. Does council want to entertain a 5-year extension with waste management, or do we want to put this out for bids? Because we're probably going to get the same type of thing when we scope this and put it out for bids. We'll probably have most, if not all, the vendors that will have a large degree of automation proposed in their proposals, or else the cost is going to be significantly higher for a hand pick.
Well, if I recall correctly, the last time this went to vote, there was a bid by another company that was actually lower than Waste Management. So I would be strongly in favor of having another, more opening it up and bringing it out there, unless they came and just, swiped us off our feet, which I don't see that happening.
Well, and if it's worthwhile to council to see, we can go back and see what the cost difference would have been, because obviously, as I think I pointed out, there was a different escalator, and that was why it wasn't so much a cost difference. It looked as though Stevens was low under most scenarios, but not all, because of that 0 to 3%, I'll say, cap with Waste Management's contract. So we can actually go look at those numbers and give you I don't want to say a post-mortem, but basically a 4-year look back as to what the cost difference would have been if we had used Stevens for that time. And I don't have a problem doing that. So just to kind of help council understand those types of things. So unless anybody has an objection to that, I think we could certainly run those numbers.
Well, it would show what the outcomes would have been, because there was a healthy discussion about it, and I think it was worthwhile that we had it, and then where we went, and now where we are. So,
Yeah.
Deb?
So downtown, okay, I know the west side, they have garbage dumpsters in certain areas. What's the plan for on the east side?
We took a walk downtown after our meeting with Waste Management and started looking at where we could put some common dumpsters. And that is the biggest challenge. East of Monroe Street it's fairly congested. We don't have the parking lot. I mean, the west side works very well because you do have you have a number of places in the parking lot that you can put dumpsters. We even looked at something like I'll say the big belly cans, which are a solar compactor. I've seen those in some other bigger cities, which are on street receptacles. They're probably about the size of this podium. But they have, like, there's a solar in it to tell you when it needs to compact, and then it's got, green, yellow, and red lights. That was an intriguing, something we were looking at. But that's going to be one of the challenges. And obviously, as you might know, if you have a second floor residence, you're going to have a tough time rolling a 96-gallon can down your stairs. So those are things that we're probably going to have to treat downtown separately and aggressively figure out what we're going to do a year from now when we have to go to a new model potentially.
Well, and just thinking about it, like, let's take the towns on front. And I don't know how they pay their garbage or whatever. So all those people, their garbage truck can't go around the back side of them. So they have to roll it out to the front?
Well, that's actually it's funny. Ms. Pallett and I were talking about that while you were in closed session a little bit. We're investigating whether or not they'll have a unit that would be able to pick those up in the alley behind. So those are exactly the type of concerns we have, because the other option we had with them was looking at common dumpsters and taking them out of Waste Management's contract and putting them in our dumpster contract, similar to downtown, because of that very challenge. So we may end up with a little more fragmented refuse contract than we might like, but there are options, and it's just incumbent upon me and the staff to figure those things out and make it work for everyone. But that's a very valid point, and that's one of the drawbacks to going to that model.
Well, we are, I think it's safe to say, committed to finding a solution for the entire downtown outside of rolling the refuse to the curb. I think it's been successful on the west side of Monroe, and now we really got to find the spots on the east side so that it has the same level of success. So it's up to us to figure that out, though.
Well, in the alley, like where I live, there's dumpsters all along there. They have to get out and pull those dumpsters out, and then they have to dump them. So maybe it would be a little beneficial if the city looked at maybe putting something through there.
Well, and it's entirely possible that we could replace some of those private dumpsters with common public dumpsters. I'll just throw an example out there, Martin Shoe House. I have no idea how often they really need to have their dumpster emptied, but I'm guessing it's not more than once a week. And it's probably not full. So if we can find a few businesses, and that's what the idea was on the west side, you pool those together, and then we pick them up more frequently. And so there should be space in that alley to replace a few of those. Now, the restaurants are a different story, because those are going to be constantly full, and they may have to maintain their own dumpster. But our hope is that once we dig in and really do the analysis there, we're going to find that we can replace. We won't end up with net will be net zero or less dumpsters what we have now, but it'll just take them off their own private contracts and put them on with ours, which, ideally would be fair anyway, because they're paying the same millages as everyone else.
Right. But I do think that they got some homework to do to figure out some of these little issues.
And so do we as a staff, so,
Okay,
and we realize that, which is why we're trying to start this now.
thank you.
From council? I'm sorry, Deb, were you finished? Okay, good. Other question, Andrew?
Thank you, sir. I would like to keep at least, even if it's intermittently, some community pickup days where there is bulk pickup availability to some extent. I don't use it every week, but I use it probably 5 times a year, and I'm glad that I have it on those days. And I'd say that my neighbors are probably pretty close to that, where it's not all the time, but it gives you a mechanism to get rid of a piece of furniture or some carpeting or whatever you need to do some improvements on your home. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck with it. So would certainly like to see something in that. When they came back to us for a cost reassessment halfway through this contract, and they pitched the bin idea from the unlimited, there was a cost to the 96-gallon bins being put forward. Would that be wrapped into the contract cost, I'm assuming?
Yes. If we're going to do a full rollout of 96-gallon carts, those would be wrapped into the cost of the
And
contract.
I'm assuming that even after that, it's going to be well below whatever the similar cost for the unlimited package that we have now.
It's funny. They gave us an unlimited. I think at the time, I'd have to go back and look at the proposals, see how they were structured. But I believe they also gave us a 3-container proposal and an unlimited proposal, and the dollars weren't actually that significant. The difference wasn't that significant, because they've still got to run all the routes. It's just how many, they have to take some guesses as to how often it's going to run into where they've got to send another truck down on that service day. And I'll tell you, sometimes that happens now where they'll anticipate 2 trucks and they end up having to bring a third down because it'll get filled up. So some of it's a guessing game on their part.
If we were going to go out to rebid it, and I'm fine with that, just to get an idea of what the costs are, I still think that it would be, if they're absolutely unwilling to bid an unlimited contract, I guess we can't help that. But I'd at least like to see, okay, this is what we had last time, and this is how much that would cost this time, and this is what this is why we're making the move.
Yeah.
Because it's cost prohibitive now. More than perhaps, just their preference as a company. Because I think that no matter what happens, that our residents are going to end up paying more for refuse collection after this next contract, and they're going to be paying more having realized that their service just went down. Now that's a realization that we all need to come to, and we need to be honest about it up front in conveying that. But I think it provides some transparency to the process if you see, here's what our costs would be now, and here's what they are because of the thing that we're going to.
I guess I'm not sure the service is less. The service may be different. And some may interpret it to be less, but
Oh, if
we
we're
don't,
moving
because we
to
don't know what the proposal is, so I can't even say that right now.
We'll have to assess the proposals, but if we're moving to any unlimited contract, to any not unlimited contract, not unlimited is less than unlimited, so.
For 95% of the residents, there will be no service change.
But
that's essentially what it's going to boil down to, because most people aren't using the unlimited. Most people are still keeping 3 containers. But I understand your point.
The point is, they're overusing or over leveraging what the unlimited is. We heard about the stories, we've seen with the stuff that's out
There are
front.
some very particular
It's
cases,
not going, some residents are not following what the terms of an unlimited is. So I'm not ready to sit here and say they're getting less. I'm thinking we have to identify what it is the service will be. And then I can't change somebody's mind if they can't put a pile of cleaned out apartment or a house, every month. I think that's unreasonable, that we think it should be unlimited at fashion. So I wouldn't think it was an intended purpose. Go ahead, Andrew, I'm sorry.
No.
Last question would be, we had some blight complaints regarding the bins in our blight sweep, was it this year or last year, and I think that the trash cans alone accounted for like 100 of those, of trash bins on the side of the house, in front of the house, and then on the corner houses. If you're on a corner house, your backyard is someone else's side yard. So then this compounds that issue, because if people don't have space for a 64-gallon drum in their garage, or don't have a garage, they certainly probably aren't going to have room for a 96-gallon one on top of that. So then I think that there's going to have to be some consideration on our part of how to deal with that.
I would agree. That's again, this is not perfect. Nothing we do here would be perfect, but that is one of the potential drawbacks. Is now you're basically forcing everyone. Whereas right now, if you don't want to take a recycling can, you don't have to.
Yeah.
But I think everybody's going to want to take a trash can.
Yeah.
And they will be larger, and they will have to go somewhere.
Not a reason not to do it, but it is something we need to address.
Sure. And and like I said, there's a possibility we could look at something if there was, if you wanted to entertain an unlimited proposal, we could do that. I'm sure Waste Management would put some numbers together for it. They may still want, though, even if it's unlimited, it has to go in a bin. So that might precipitate a situation where the resident's responsible for paying for a second bin. If they're going to regularly exceed what the 3 containers would be, they'd have to pay for a second bin. That's a possibility as well.
Yeah.
But that would still move us towards better community appearance if everything has to be in the bins. So there's other options we can look at, but I don't, Mr. Pastu.
No, I think, and I think that it's a good discussion, helpful from the administration standpoint. I know we're running out of time here before the 7:30 meeting, but we did want to let you know, it's out there. We're having this conversation. You'll probably get something where you're going to talk a little bit more about it in mid-August, and then we can figure out where we go from there with whether there's an acceptance or whether we're going to put it out on the street for other vendors. But I think everyone understands what the challenges are, what the intent is, and that's really what I wanted to accomplish with this work session discussion, is to get it on the floor and started. So
Yeah, appreciate everybody's thoughts, because that's what we needed. So, thank you.
Mr. Pasto, I know you had one sentence.
I can
on
wait
it.
till the regular meeting under
Okay.
manager comments.
Okay. Any other comments? I know we don't have a minute. I need a couple of minutes, so I'm gonna, this time, I'll close the work session and we'll get started when everybody gets back.